Size-changing powers are a staple for any effective superhero team, and the father of shrinking technology in the Marvel Universe is Hank Pym. Though he's taken the persona of Giant Man, Yellow Jacket, and even the Wasp, Pym started out as Ant-Man, the guy who rides ants into battle. Super cool, right? First debuting in Astonishing Tales number 27, Pym was created by Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. Tales to Astonish is known for creating all sorts of different science fiction stories, normally involving monsters with a ridiculous premise. These beasts all had abnormal names, such as Gorgilla, the Blip, Krang, and others. Even Groot got his start here in issue 13. Pym is shown to be a scientist that is developing size-changing technology. Ridiculed by the scientific community for his theories, he doubles down on his studies until a formula comes to fruition. The benefits of such a serum are endless, shrinking items down to decrease the cost of shipping, sending armies behind enemy lines virtually undetectable. After testing the shrinking serum on non-living material, Hank decides it's time for human trials, with himself as the guinea pig. A few drops later, and Pym's height can now be measured in inches. There's only one flaw in his plan, however. The growth serum is on a windowsill. That wouldn't be much of a problem for a normal-sized human, but it can be much more difficult for somebody the size of an insect. Soon after, he finds himself outside, standing in awe of his horrifying success of an experiment. His cries fall onto the ears of a nearby anthill, whose inhabitants quickly overtake the scientist. Realizing he has no other choice, Hank rushes inside the anthill, hoping for a hiding place from his arthropodic attackers, but ends up falling down a tunnel into a lake of honey. And why is there a lake of honey in an anthill? I don't know. It's the 60s. I guess that should explain it. And that would have been the end, if not for a wayward ant passing by. After rescuing him, the ant seems to be friendly, even if the other ants are still assailing the hapless scientist. Fortunately for Hank, it seems that a matchstick was somehow carried back to the anthill. After igniting it with a rock, the ensuing flames distract the ants long enough for him to use a makeshift lasso to reach the upper level of the cavern. And waiting for him at the top is a gargantuan pair of mandibles. All would have been lost if Hank hadn't utilized his judo skills that have never been mentioned before in the story in such a way as to throw the ant off himself and over the cliff. After escaping the confines of the anthill, Hank is cornered underneath the windowsill, with the growth serum in sight. The situation seems hopeless, until the same friendly ant that rescued him from his previous sticky situation, you know, 'cause the honey, shows up and carries him to safety. Once exposed to the formula, Pym quickly regains his original height. Deciding the size-changing serum is too dangerous to let fall into the wrong hands, he destroys his research. And from that day on, Hank Pym never stepped on another anthill, because he knew that down there lives one little insect that he owes his life to. A few months later, the Ant-Man returns, and gets revamped. Tales to Astonish number 35 was written by Stan Lee and penciled by Jack Kirby. After a while of returning to their sci-fi stories, Lee wanted to take the series in a different direction and create another superhero. And he really enjoyed the character that he, Kirby, and Lieber created for issue number 27. Over the following months, Pym decides that he can't let his life's work disappear, and he recreates the serum, but he keeps them hidden away in a safe in his office. Hank dedicates his life to becoming a myrmecologist. That's just a fancy word for a dude who studies ants. He deduces that ants communicate through electrical impulses through their antennae, and creates a helmet that allows him to tune in to the ant's wavelength, allowing him to essentially speak to the little insects. That very same day, the government tasks Pym, along with 4 other scientists, with creating a gas that renders people immune to radiation. It's the Cold War, and the whole threat of nuclear war is a common theme in the early 60s. And just as the team is almost finished developing the gas, word gets out to the Soviets. They send gunmen to take over the laboratory, and they try to intimidate Hank into giving them the formula, but he refuses to give in to their demands. They lock him in his office, not realizing that his ant helmet and size-changing serum are locked in there with him. He dons the suit and grabs some thread, a rubber band, and an ashtray before he applies the shrinking serum to himself. He shrinks just as rapidly as he did that day many months ago. Using the rubber band and the ashtray to launch himself to the window, Ant-Man uses the thread to climb down from the other side. The insect-sized wonder speeds off towards the anthill, with memories of the last time he was inside fresh in his mind. At first, the ants attack him, but to his surprise, he is easily able to throw the ants off of him. It seems as if he keeps the same strength as when he is full size, when he's small. He uses the helmet to speak to the ants, convincing them to follow him inside the lab. Here's a diagram of his helmet, because that's how science works. On his way out of the anthill, Ant-Man and his army of arthropods are met by a beetle. Only at this size, it's as if it's as large as a dinosaur. He quickly digs a hole using his full-size strength, and using himself as bait, he lures the insect near the pit. As the bug attacks, Ant-Man ducks out of the way, causing the beetle to fall into the hole. Using his ants to climb up the wall, Ant-Man gets back into the building through the crack under the window and proceeds to untie his associates. He then calls upon his army of ants to swarm the gunmen, biting them and jamming all of their guns, rescuing the scientists and allowing them to take over the fight. Hank quickly changes back to his normal size, just in time to help his fellow scientists round up the criminals. Tales to Astonish number 36 takes on a new writer, Larry Lieber, but keeps Jack Kirby on as the artist. The issue opens up, and a bank is being robbed, but the burglars became trapped inside the vault because of the time lock, and their only hope is Ant-Man. He goes inside the lock and activates the tumblers, unlocking the door and allowing the police to take the criminals into custody. Thousands of miles away, behind the Iron Curtain, Soviet leaders hear of the incredible feats of the Ant-Man, and they decide to send in Comrade X. Ant-Man set up a communication line of ants to notify him of crimes occurring in the city. They notify him of a girl in trouble, and Hank decides it is a perfect time to test out his new shrinking gas. Minutes later, Ant-Man launches himself out into the city. Look at this diagram of his setup, it's kind of really simple. Wonder. The 60s were a strange time. Only to be caught by his six-legged friends. He shows up at her apartment, and she tells him that her old lover, Comrade X, is back in the country, and Ant-Man rushes off to meet him at the docks. He climbs aboard the ship, but Comrade X was ready for him, and he puts a glass box over Ant-Man and his ants. Using his helmet, he contacts some ants back on shore, and instructs them to take some pieces of wood and float them over to the boat. That's a flimsy premise, isn't it? What if the water was flowing the opposite direction? How would the ants get to the boat? Where they swarm the guard standing over the box, causing him to drop his gun on the glass, freeing Ant-Man. He sneaks into Comrade X's quarters, but the villain takes out a spray gun to stun the hero. But before he can use it, Ant-Man's ants shut the lights off. He manages to tie Comrade X's shoelaces together, and he is swarmed by hundreds of ants after he hits the ground. The ants manage to remove his mask, and his real identity is actually the woman who summoned him in the first place. She has a voice changer to make her voice sound masculine. He leaves her tied up as the Coast Guard comes in to arrest the criminals. That concludes our episode for today. Let me know what you think in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe if you like what you see. Join us next time to see the introduction of the Incredible Hulk. I'm your host, Gavin, and thanks for watching.